Good afternoon. Welcome to Committed, the college admissions playbook. So a little bit different from the style we've done in the past. So Rennie is usually our quarterback. He had a thing come up today, so then I get to take the lead on it. So I'm really excited. We've talked before about bringing on, experts in various fields, former students, students, interested in athletics, and stage of the game with all of these class of 2024 graduates picking their schools. Now the conversations have shifted towards how are they going to pay for it. So my first thought was I'm going to reach out to a personal friend, my own financial advisor. So Matt Blocki, he is the CEO, president of Equilibrium Wealth Advisors, EWA. He serves clients nationally. He's located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but has clients all over the country, even some all over the world, right, Matt?
Dual citizens, but that's right. Yep.
Okay. So he was the first person that I thought to bring on as we start talking about the finances and how to pay for this in regards to college, how to plan for it, I think more importantly. And just a backstory about Matt. Not only is Matt a personal friend, he's my financial planner. And just to give you a little bit of a backstory. So the relationship that we have, this goes back, what, Matt? 12, 15 years at this point?
Yeah. Started at when Nikki was a resident.
Yeah. And I actually use you in a lot of my conversations. So when I'm talking with these kids and they want to go into the finance game, and, so much of it is being good with numbers, but the ability to communicate and to connect with your people and to gain the trust. And I always share your story because I tell these students, listen, man, you have to do something to differentiate yourself. And the guy who handles all of my money now, who I trust more than family, sadly, we met him 12, 15 years ago, and he was right out of college. He was building up his own brand, and he connected with these group of residents who at the time had very little money, and he gained their trust. He helped them consolidate all of their student loans, and it was very strategic. Matt, you did amazing at getting these people when from an income level they were on the lower end, but knowing that their ceiling was going to explode here in a few years. And so you were able to build these connections, get these people to trust you, to care about you, and then now you're able to create this business for yourself where you have all these clients, and it's turned into a friendship. You're not my financial guy, you're my guy.
Agreed. It's a lot of fun.
So I'm really excited to have you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember those conversations were heavily predicated on school loans, and now, really appreciate what you do. I see it's an epidemic out there, but I see a lot of what you do is not just take the stress and the decision fatigue out of, high school graduates going to college, but also so that make good decisions, get extra money so they don't get out of college, strapped with school loans. So I know that chapter is well closed for you and Nikki, but I'm sure you can speak, directly about how stressful those first couple years out of college can be if you don't do it right.
It really is. And I think you used the perfect word. The epidemic of these college costs are increasing every year. And, I've talked about this on prior episodes, the days of, paying $10, $12, $15,000 a year for school, they're long gone. Those, state schools and public schools that, you could affordably pay, it's really difficult now. And, with the tuition costs spiking, it's pretty common when you see your tuition bill and room and board, it's $40, $50, $60,000 a year. And for a lot of people when they graduate, depending on the field they're going into, it's paralyzing. These student loans are real, and, you get that 6-month grace period after you graduate. But at some point, that money and those bills become real that you have to find a way to pay.
No question.
So Matt, before I have 3 specific questions that I really want you to dive into. But from the financial guru that you are, could you share kind of what your strategy would be? So you have a daughter, she's similar to my son's age, 4 or 5 years old. What is the strategy for how you're planning for her to eventually go on and pursue some sort of post-secondary education?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the first thing I'm highly aware of is giving her the gift that I had growing up, which was how to handle adversity. Love my parents. Their professional paths, they didn't have the means to fund college. What they did do a good job is kicking my butt into gear. Getting good grades. And I obviously played sports. I came out of college with fully paid. Most of it was paid through grants, scholarships, etc. But I came out of school with about $30,000. So the first thing that's really front of mind for me, because I've had friends that have had it fully paid, and just seeing their motivation levels post college versus handling that stress yourself, it's night and day. So the first thing that I'm really thinking about is how do I not mess her motivation up. And that could happen if I just say, hey, it's fully paid for up front. So skin in the game is a huge thing. So the first thing I think about is I do want to fully pay it, but I want to have the flexibility that she can have her own skin in the game and keep that motivation level high, because I think that handling adversity and having motivation is a gift. And sometimes when I help our kids so much, it can end up the greatest gift can end up being can kind of work backwards on you. So with that being said, I do fully plan on funding her college, but it's going to be a strategy where she does have some skin in the game along the way. Maybe I'll surprise her on the back end, pay half of it up front, half of it on the back end. So secondly, with that being said, there's two vehicles I use and I recommend other clients use. So the first one would be a traditional 529 plan. This is something in 2024, we're recording this, you can put $18,000 a year into it. And I live in Pennsylvania. I get a state tax deduction of 3.07% on the majority of that contribution. So save over $500 of state tax on the way in. But then once it's in there, it grows tax free, and it gets distributed tax free if it's used for private school K through 12, post undergrad or post grad. So any kind of higher education, I can get the money out tax free. But where you get into trouble is if you overfund these things and you're using it for some other reason, then you're going to get penalized and taxed. So just to use a really simple example, if I put in $100,000 over the next, let's say 15 years, and the thing is worth $300,000, if I use it all for college, undergrad, postgrad, whatever it might be, all $300,000 is going to go out tax free. Awesome. However, if she gets a full ride somewhere and then I end up using that $300,000 to do something else, like let's say buy a vacation house or retire early, me, I'll never retire, but that $100,000 I contributed, I do get back without tax and penalty. But that $200,000 of growth, I'm going to pay my tax rate on. The highest tax rate's 37%. A lot of people are in a 24% bracket. So somewhere between 24 to 37, plus you're going to pay a 10% penalty on that. So, if you're in the highest tax bracket, federal, state, and penalty, half of that growth is going to be gone. So if it's used for college, all 300,000 is going. If it's not used for college, I keep the 100, but then the 200 of growth, I lose about 100 of that. So now my $300,000 balance goes down to 200,000. So with that being said, let's just say hypothetically, I want to fund a private school for her that costs $50,000 a year right now. That's $200,000 for a 4-year. Well, I know that's going to probably be $600,000 adjusted for inflation when she gets there.
By the time our kids get up there, yeah, sadly.
So we'll just call it, unfortunately, probably $150,000 a year is what we expected to cost. So $600,000. I want half of the money in a 529 plan. I want half of the money in a traditional brokerage account that's under my name, my control. Same example, I put 100 in that thing, it grows to 300. Whether I use it for college, my own use, whatever, I'm just going to pay a capital gain rate on the growth. So that may be 15% for some people, that may be 23.8% for some people. We'll just use the 15%, for example. That 300 is going to get cut down to 270, but it's flexible. It can be used for any reason, anytime. And the real reason behind having those two vehicles and not just dumping it all in the 529 plan is I want to have the ability to allow her to handle adversity, have skin in the game. And then secondly, if she gets a full ride, I don't want to get whacked with penalties and taxes. And then third is if the market crashes. So if we're in a 2008, that 529 plan drops, unfortunately, I can't use a 529 plan tax free to pay off a school loan and wait for the market to recover. It has to be used for the current year's tuition payment. Now there's a new rule. You can roll a little bit of it on the back end into a Roth IRA. I believe that's like 35,000. Don't quote me on the exact number, but high level picture, you don't want to have a leftover balance to a 529 plan. If, for my example, if I have one kid, now if I have more kids, which I plan on, no worries. I could just let that 529 plan recover and change the beneficiary to another child. So there's lots of flexibility, but where the cardinal sin in financial planning is, you take it out at a loss. And so if you have it all in a 529 plan with the inflexibility of being able to let it recover, I don't want to have all the money stuff there. Where the taxable account, I could secure it and take a line against it and not disrupt it for taxes, not disrupt it for market timing, pay the tuition, then the market comes back and then I can pay it, sell the stocks and pay off the loan at that point. So there's a lot of flexibility if I have a 50-50 approach. So that's a very nerdy, I'm a numbers guy, as you know, but just wanted to give you the full rationale psychologically and then also from a financial standpoint.
I thank you, man. I used to think I was a numbers guy, and then I talked to you, and I'm like, yeah, that's not even close. So, I mean, it's clear, everybody, there's a lot of strategy that's involved with this, and being a professional in the field, I was somebody that, Matt, to your point, the skin in the game. I'm a firm believer that there has to be some accountability, and that idea of allowing them to face adversity. I love it. Everything that Matt just described is exactly what my wife and I did to set up post-secondary education funding for our two kids. And, prior to children, and I was the naive, I paid for my own schooling, so, they can buckle up and pay for theirs. That approach went out the window the second my son was born. And then the 529 started, the money market started. So everything that Matt just shared, as somebody who does this for a living, I'm following suit.
It's it's such a giant advantage to have parents that will raise you with the right values, and then it's such a strong advantage. That's first and foremost the ability to handle adversity, whether that means taking out a loan or not. That's a separate individualized conversation, but it is such an advantage to come out of school with either no debt or a low amount of debt. And so that's why I do have the flexibility to fully fund it. I plan on it, but I also plan on never messing up my daughter's motivation at the same token.
Matt, I remember we had a conversation off air probably a month ago at this point, and you had kind of some calculation that you were doing, because obviously you're a numbers guy, and we were throwing out, how much should somebody spend for college? Because that's a common question that we get. What is an average number, or, what should we try to target? What's your calculation for that?
So I have these rules, these guiding principles for every decision. For example, we have a house rule. If your gross income is 250, don't go 2x above it. If your gross income is 100, you should buy. Don't go 2x. House should be 200,000. And that's really to give you the answer of you not being house poor. So when we go to school loans, if you want to have a child that can live on their own post college with their first job, just realistically, they shouldn't come out. So if someone's coming out as a social worker and they're going to make 50 grand and 3 years later they're going to make 60 grand, that person should not be exiting school with more than $60,000 school loans. If you're going to be an accountant making 100,000 after 3 years, you shouldn't have more than 100. If you're a doctor, that's kind of the anomaly, because you're probably making 200 to 500 after. So that's where that from undergrad and med school we can go. But general rule of thumb is anticipate your major, anticipate your career, look at national data. What is someone in my position that I want to do going to make gross income wise 3 years out of college? Make sure your debt load at the point that you exit college no more than that one-time salary. And it's just math. It's just budgeting. If you come out with $100,000 of school loans and you're making 60 grand, let's say you're clearing $3,500 a month after a little 401k contribution, your health, all the taxes come out, $3,500 a month. You have $100,000 of school loans, your payment's probably $1,000 a month. And so now we've got $2,500 a month. Well, tell me where you can rent a nice place for less than 2,000. So now how are we going to eat? How are we going to have a car? How are we going to have? So it's just simple math. Like a lot of people think, go follow your dreams, child, and then they come out with $200,000 of school loans and they're making 50 grand a year. I mean, it's not possible. Yeah.
Chasing that experience, so much of what we do when we try to guide these kids. Yes, do I want them to go where they want to go? Do I want them to have the best experience? But does it make sense ultimately? The 4 years that you're going to experience at a college, you're going to pay for it for life, potentially.
For sure.
So the numbers are the numbers, and it has to make sense. We do, a pretty cool little activity. So Sally Mae, they have a loan calculator online, and we play with those hypothetical numbers often. So, we put in, you want to go to Penn State. It's, our state public school. It should be one of the cheaper schools around there. For an in-state kid who wants to live on campus, money is pretty tight there. Generally, you're going to pay 35 grand a year.
I was going to guess 40, but yeah, that's crazy. Because it used to be, when we were talking, I remember it was like 23, I think 10 or 15 years ago. Inflation's
35. So I mean, even like, the quality in-state public school, you're coming out with 120, 130,000. And to your point, you build that budget and your monthly payment is $1,200 a month. Depending on what your salary is, it could be debilitating.
It could be half your paycheck. Yeah. So that's a general, and then most people look at me like if they don't have it fully funded, they're like, well, that's not possible. And then we have the tough conversation. Well, easy choice is hard life, hard choice is easy life. The hard choice now is not going to the dream school, changing your major 10 times, maybe go to a community college for 2 years or a cheap school and then maybe transfer in. Maybe, but those hard choices, maybe it's not the most enjoyable thing, but if you don't have anything funded in advance, like you are going to set yourself up for success versus 4 years of happiness will lead to a lifetime of being behind versus 4 years of being smart. Maybe not having the most fun or the best experience or the most prestigious will maybe lead to the best results long term. So
right,
the balance.
You might not have the best experience at 20 years old, but when you're 30, you'll make up for it.
College is a fun experience, and no matter where you go, where I went, I know where you went. You can make the best experience. I would say we had fun. I had a better time than all the other colleges, like Penn State, Pitt. We had a blast. So it's not what you think.
It's all about the mindset.
Yeah,
it's all about the mindset. If you go somewhere and you're expecting it to be a certain thing, that's how it's going to be. These kids, putting yourselves out there and connect, and you find ways to have fun.
No question.
If you're willing to, that is.
Absolutely.
So Matt, one other question that we are getting constantly now. So like I said, these parents, they're in a position now where, some they're able to fully fund it. For them, God bless. For the parents that are not, they are looking into, private loans. And a scenario that we see often is, a family, they have a 529 plan set up. And let's just say hypothetically there is $80,000 in this 529. They are paying for their kid to go to school that might cost $40,000 a year. So the question that we get pretty often is, how do we strategically utilize the funds in this 529? Do we fully fund years 1 and 2 and then finance years 3 and 4, so we are only paying interest on the last 2 years versus interest on portions of all 4? Or do we chop that 80,000 divided by 4 and then we pay for some, finance for some? Any insight on that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, and it depends on market conditions. If we're sitting here and the 529 plan just got cut in half because we're in a 2008, then we're having the discussion of maybe we're financing the first 2. We're hoping that recovers on the back end, but we don't want to be stuck with that balance at the end, because if this is the only kid, the 529 plan is going to hurt you having a balance after, but then utilizing it to pay off loans or use it for something else with those taxes and penalties. So if the market's under normal or good conditions, we're absolutely using the 529 plan up front. We're exhausting it 100%. And we're celebrating because that was the purpose you set it up. I know a lot of people like saving money. They hate spending it. It's psychological. It's like we like seeing that balance. Get rid of the thing as quick as you possibly can. If it's using for college and it's coming out tax-free, it's a huge win. So if the market's under good or stable conditions, absolutely. If we're in the college years, the dangerous thing about like if you have a retirement account, a stock market collapse, even right when you retire, doesn't matter because we're not rating that whole account all at once. Hopefully, we're diversified and we can take from something, nothing at a loss. We generally recommend like 7 years of backup for retirement planning. But we have like a 30-year time period where 1 or 2 years of being bad is irrelevant. When in college, you kind of have the 4-year sniper shot. So we got to be really careful at making sure that the money is supporting your life by design. And for this account, it was meant to support funding your kids' college. And so if we have the opportunity to do that, do it. Don't take any risks. So if we're under normal market conditions and I'm advising that client, we are repositioning that portfolio to a conservative portfolio and celebrating that we're in a good market year and we're fully paying the tuition in year 1 and 2. And then year in 3 and 4, that's when we take out the school loans. The only exception to that would be if they're getting subsidized loans that don't accrue interest. I don't know what the max on those are right now, 8,000 a year or something, but we're taking those,
Yeah,
the minimum out.
varies depending on which grade they're going or which year of college they're going into.
If we have free money, we're getting the free money and then we're paying the rest with the 529 plan. And then any interest accruing loan, we're waiting until all other resources are exhausted.
Perfect. All right. Hopefully, you guys out there are taking notes because, fortunately, that is the advice that I've been giving to our clients as well, and that's because I consulted with you before this. But exhaust the 529 as much as you can. Now, I wasn't able to give them the number calculations and sharing how much they were able to save based on interest and versus how much it would grow. But just from a strategy standpoint, that money is used for that particular reason. Exhaust it.
No question. And you're never going to know what the right decision was until it's over. Looking back, oh, that's what the market did. This was the interest rate. Forget it all because it's there's a lot of the lowest risk, highest reward scenario if we're under good market conditions is using the 529 plan. There's very few simulations that's not going to work in your benefit.
All right, Matt. Last question, and then I'll stop grilling you. So as you know, the majority of the families that we work with, students, ranging anywhere between like 9th grade to 12th grade, but I would say the bulk of the students that are signing on with us are in that 10th to 11th grade because they are interested in being proactive about their college process. So, advice from you, what do you think is the best way for a family to strategize if maybe they didn't have any financial planning up to this point, no money in a 529 just because life was hard or it wasn't a priority, and now that their kids are hitting high school or maybe in their first or second year of high school, how could they potentially prepare to stash some money away to eventually help their kids 2 years from now?
Yeah, and this happens all the time. So it really is. We'd be looking at a mix of, if we have a bunch of cash on hand, you can also do a 5-year acceleration in a 529 plan. That typically is beneficial. So meaning if one spouse could put in 90,000 this year, the other spouse could put in 90. So you could put 180,000 all at once in a 529 plan. The biggest benefit of the 529 plan though is the tax deferral. So if you're 2 years away from college, there's not going to be a huge benefit for sticking that in a 529 plan. We would definitely stick the annual max in there, at least to get the state tax deduction, invest it very conservatively, and then pull it right out. There's just simple ways we can save it, a couple $1,000s. But we would look at cash flow. How much can we cash flow? How much can we save in advance? How much can we? What are the school loans that need to be taken out to fulfill the gap? And then maybe some of those school loans aren't school loans. Maybe the parents are taking like a home equity line of credit, and then in part of their financial plan, we're paying that off during school and after school. So there's lots of creative ways to like different buckets. If it, cash flow, if the spouses have a big bonus, we can pay the tuition that way. It's saving in advance. School loans, maybe the kids working in college, some I did, for example, and then maybe it's the parents paying off the school loans, and then maybe it's the kids paying off the school loan. So when you spread it out over 5 or 6 options, it's very manageable. But having the plan in place is very important, because money and financial planning, it's kind of like in the universe. I love the analogy of like the universe doesn't like cracks. So if you look at any crack, like in my office or outside, what accumulates in cracks? Well, water from rain goes there, and then all kinds of yuck like dirt goes in. And so Money's the same way. If you don't call dibs and shots on where your money's going, like it's going to get spent. And I refer to this as the money temperature. If you don't call dibs on it, it's going to be spent. So the most important thing is mapping this out and having a plan. So, the money's allocated there, it doesn't get spent. Because if we don't have the plan, it's going to disappear. And not saying like anyone's being irresponsible. That's just how it works. Like as your income goes up, spending goes up naturally. And so you got to really call the shots on it up front.
Yeah, life happens. You're to your point about just strategy. I mean, with anything else, these kids are, going through this, strategizing what's the best fit, what's the best pathway. And then also the parents, they need to strategize and, have conversations with each other and have conversations with their students about, what's feasible and what's realistic. And, if there are certain things that are realistic, they have to plan for it.
No question.
Matt, can't thank you enough, man. The amount of knowledge that you have. So Matt Blocki, CEO of Equilibrium Wealth Advisors, based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's obvious he's an expert. Anybody who, wants to do anything related to financial strategy, wealth management, I cannot recommend him enough. Matt, what's the best way for anybody to reach you?
Greatly appreciate it. You can just email me directly. Just my name, Matt Blocki at ewa-llc.com.
Perfect. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. You're here for Committed, the college admissions playbook.
Thanks for having me, John.
Thanks, Matt.